PixieCast time. Hello, everybody, and welcome to back for the PixieCast. We are on episode 3. Woo! I can't believe it. For everybody that might be new here, hello. My name is Connor. I'm also known as the Paranormal Pixie. I work in Los Angeles as a paranormal historian, tour guide. I also have some work in the film industry, and I'm kind of an all-around nerd. I created the PixieCast as a way for me to share some of those stories that I don't get to talk about either on my tours, or maybe they're kind of outdated stories, or just things that I have personally found interesting. Not everything is going to be ghosts and spooky stuff. I'm going to cover a bunch of different topics. Actually, today we are covering something totally different. We're actually going to be looking into the hot mess that was the 2015 reboot of the Fant4stic with Micheal B. directed by Josh Trank. It is a terrible movie, and its production was an absolute nightmare, it seems like. And I wanted to take a look down this deep dive. So that is something that, if you're not interested in this one, which I understand, some of you guys are just here for the spooky stuff. That's okay. I'll get back to the spooky stuff. But during the pandemic, I won't lie, things got a little too depressing for me to continue covering haunted stuff. So I made the decision to kind of branch out, and I picked a different area to research for a little while, and that ended up being superhero movies and the scandals behind the scenes. And it's really fun, so I really hope that you will, sit through this ride with me, because we're going to have a good time seeing what a shit show this actually is. So please like and subscribe. As always, my notes and any kind of relevant information, my sources, and a rough transcript, my shooting transcript of this, of my podcast. So you'll find it there on my website, paranormalpixie.com. Oh, one last thing. Some of you guys might be watching me. Hi! I am recording this episode as a video podcast. We're going to see how it goes. I am kind of looking forward to it. There's been a lot of noise in my apartment, so I thought it might be a little bit easier if you could maybe see some of it. I'm still recording this as audio only, so if you can't see me, just know that I still love you. But right now, it's PixieCast time! Arrgh. So for those of you that are watching this episode, my script is off to the side, so I might be glancing over there pretty regularly. Anyway. Before Disney gathered every piece of Marvel's soul like it was the Infinity Stones to create their MCU, other studios had the film rights to some of Marvel's major characters, like Spider-Man and the X-Men. And for today, we're looking at the Fant4stic franchise, who was owned by 20th Century Fox prior to 20th Century Fox's acquisition by Disney. Little complicated. It's not relevant right now. What is relevant is who is the Fant4stic. If you don't know, Fant4 is a kind of family of superheroes in Marvel. They're often called the First Family. You have Mr. Fant4stic, whose ability is stretching. He's super smart. He's basically the mom from The Incredibles, but a dude. Sue Storm and her brother Johnny Storm, who respectively end up being the Invisible Woman and the Human Torch. We have Ben Grimm, who becomes known as the Thing. He's probably, I would say, the most recognizable character from this franchise. He's the big orange rocky superhero in the blue trunks. And their great villain, Dr. Victor Von Doom. He's a villain, That's like the briefest of overviews before we really dig into this. But circling back to Fox already had two kind of medium successful Fant4 movies from the early 2000s. They're pretty iconic. You have Jessica Alba looking really hot, even in that silly blonde wig. Baby Chris Evans playing the Human Torch. Oh my gosh. He even got to have a little cameo coming back in Deadpool versus Wolverine last year in 2024. Anyway, the second installment in that Jessica Alba, Chris Evans version of the Fant4 fell pretty flat. And 20th Century Fox made the decision to shelve the Fant4 franchise for a couple years until they came up with a new idea to reboot the series. In fact, they waited so long that in 2013, when they realized the rights would expire if they did not start production on a new Fantastic Four movie, like, immediately. And thus the ball gets rolling on the gritty Fantastic Four reboot. The title Fant4stic. It's the one with the 4 in the middle of it. To ease all of our brains, I am going to refer to this movie, Fantastic Four with the 4 in the middle of it, as F4 for the remainder of this. That'll also differentiate between me talking about the team of the Fantastic Four and the movie itself, which we will be calling F4. Let's go. F4's production happened during kind of this, like, Twitter golden age. It was that point in time where fans and creators and people in the film industry and even writers just had more connection and were able to interact in ways that we weren't able to before. What that means for Fantastic Four, for F4, is that there is going to be a lot of it posted online. People were blogging about it at the time, live reacting to news from the set, news from the production. It kind of had this, like, insider feel to a lot of it, but it also means that there is a lot of hearsay coming into this story. And I'm going to do my best to parse out, the fact from the fiction. I'm going to create this timeline. There is a lot of allegedly in this, despite a lot of this being aired out on Twitter and in articles in the decade since F4 comes out. It's still a lot of hearsay. None of it's definitive. So I'm going to do my best to make this timeline, and I will say what is confirmed fact and what is hearsay, and including some insider info that I've learned over the years kind of looking into it. So some of it may not have proof, but I feel confident in saying it. Anyway, I'm rambling. Let's get going. If I was a studio executive in 2012 looking for a fresh-faced director to helm my gritty F4 reboot, Josh Trank would probably be a very good idea. Trank had directed a few TV episodes before finding massive success with his indie darling movie called Chronicle in 2012. Chronicle features a group of superpowered teens trying to navigate both getting their new powers and the teen angst that is just innate in growing up. I mean, when you think about it, that's exactly what the Fantastic Four are. They're people coming to terms with suddenly having these radical powers. You see why the studio would pick Trank to direct a superhero movie like this, specifically like Fantastic Four. Fox probably thought that Trank would be really grateful for the opportunity to have this big tentpole name directed with his name on it, and that he would sit there and listen to all of the studio's notes and they would make something together. This is what Disney does with its younger directors when they're brought in, so it's not unheard of. It's kind of the way. But for today's story, when we're talking about, theoretically, Josh Trank was a perfect choice to direct 2015's F4. Obviously, that does not work out. Internal production issues began almost immediately on F4. Like I said, Trank was brought on in 2012, right after the success of Chronicle, and he was still really green. This was going to be his first studio movie. And instead of taking Fox's or anybody else's cues, Josh Trank decides that he is going to do whatever he wants to make his version of the Fantastic Four. Studio execs, writers, any kind of input be damned. He is making his F4. Look, I'm not going to say whether or not a director should or shouldn't listen to a studio implicitly. there are definitely arguments for both, and I can come up with multiple movies that argue either case. It really depends on the movie, the director, and the studio. But let's be clear here. In my opinion, what Josh Trank does for this movie in F4 is 100% for the worst. You see, Josh Trank hated the idea of making a standard superhero movie that would have his name on it. He wanted something gritty and real that was basically his movie Chronicle, which is a great movie. And that is what Fox wanted on paper, you know? Gritty reboots and YA dystopia were all the rage in the 2010s. Sounds perfect, right? But what everybody fails to comprehend going into F4 is how much Trank legitimately hated the superhero genre. He had been vocal about his distaste for it in the past during the promotional time for Chronicle, but the true depths that Trank is going to go to not make a superhero movie while making a massive tentpole superhero movie is... Like, did Fox even talk to him first? Initially, Josh Trank inherited a script from the X-Men First Class writers Zach Stentz and Ashley Miller. Stentz revealed in a podcast interview with Kevin Smith on his Fat Man on Batman podcast that their version of the Fantastic Four saw both the Fantastic Four and Dr. Doom, Victor Von Doom, before he's Doctor, working together as a close-knit group. However, after the accident where they get their powers, Victor becomes, quote, just too damaged and effed up to be a part of them, end quote. First Class is actually a really good soft reboot of a franchise, so I feel like the script was probably a solid starting point, and that seems to be the general rumor of it. This script has never seen the light of day. And it doesn't sound like Josh Trank looked at this script either. Even if he did, he probably just promptly tossed it out the window as soon as it reached his hands without thinking too much about it. This first writing team isn't even credited for F4, despite, like I said, the reports that their script was solid. Trank instead talked Fox into bringing on his friend Jeremy Slater to draft a new, less comic booky version of F4. I did read one Collider article that said Slater was already attached, but based on everything else that goes on here, I don't think that makes sense. Anyway, Slater had helped Josh Trank early on when he was developing Chronicle. Slater added his knowledge as a comic book nerd to offer input and some of those more stereotypically superhero elements that show up in the movie. Honestly, they say it was mostly just getting stoned and talking about the world building. Ultimately, Slater passes on the chance to write Chronicle for himself. His agent suggested that he should skip the smaller project and focus on some bigger fish. I'm sure they regret saying that. But the job to write Chronicle went over to Max Landis, Nepo baby, funny guy. Anyway, it seemed like a great idea for Trank to bring his friend into the writing room now that he had his hands in a bigger project that was still up. I keep trying to call him Ethan Slater. Oops. Jeremy Slater. You want to be working with your friends. Isn't that the point of creating together? Anyway. Jeremy Slater and Fox seem to be on the same page regarding what they originally wanted out of F4. They wanted something that would follow the vibes of Joss Whedon's recent 2012 Avengers movie that had absolutely knocked the socks off of fans, but their F4 still needed to have the family-centered heart that makes the Fantastic Four who they are. Slater said that he is incredibly proud of his original script. He based it off of some of the Fantastic Four's most popular storylines and some of his favorite that he read when he was a kid. A Birth, Movies, and Death piece from 2015 allegedly got a hold of the script and leaked a synopsis of what was supposed to be a 121-page script. And let me just say, a lot happens. And if you're a Fantastic Four fan, all of these are probably really exciting. Here are some of the rapid-fire highlights. Victor Von Doom is secretly feeding all of Reed Richards' research back to his home country of Latveria, which, yes, he does become the ruler of at the end of this version. The team and Victor all get their powers in a fight with Galactus in the negative zone, but this happens in the very first act of the movie. Ben Grimm does join the military as a military asset. He's used as a weapon. Johnny Storm gets to be a cool reality TV show after getting his powers. Reed Richards builds Herbie the robot and a bunch of other really cool, recognizable things. Sue Storm gets to have actual agency. She's a cool cancer scientist. She gets to fight, and she has these really cool moments. A Mole Man is a thing for a little bit, and he gets to grow giant. And at the end, you learn that Doctor Doom's evil plan is all to try and stop Galactus from coming to Earth. There's then a quick epilogue that shows the Fantastic Four creating a school to teach smart kids how to fight the big impending alien invasion. Like Ender's Game, but the alien is actually evil. Despite all of these juicy tidbits, surprisingly, the full script has never been leaked anywhere. The public could read it. If you have a copy, please let me know, because I am so curious. I know it's out there sitting in some producer's pile of scripts and in a forgotten room. If you see it, give it to us, please. But over the years, Slater has more or less confirmed the framework that I just went over, that was the plot. And just based on that synopsis, if you've seen F4, and I'll get into that, so their plot in a sec. If you see F4, they are two very different movies. There is what? So, what the hell happened here? Well, I keep saying, Trank delivered the first draft of Slater's script. It's a quick 40-page treatment with kind of the bones in place, waiting for approval and insight before, adding all of the dialogue and the juicy bits in. This is how a lot of tentpole films work, and even directors in general, writers in general, like to work this way. Outline, make sure you like the outline, fill it in. Especially when you're making something big like this, it really does feel more like a give and take. When you think about it, at the end of the day, a movie is a massive group project. If you're really lucky as a filmmaker, it's collaborative between you and your writers and the production staff and the studio. That's how it's supposed to work. However, for F4, the studio's notes never make it back to Slater. Trank sets himself up as an intermediary between the writer and the studio, effectively isolating Jeremy Slater away from the rest of the production elements. Trank only passed along the notes that he liked from the studio and would often present his own opinions as if they were the studio's. This shadowy back and forth with Trank as the middleman drags on for about 6 months before Slater finally has it. He turned in script after script for the studio to review, and Trank would take that script and return with a stack of nitpicking notes and demand another draft. When Slater finally gave up, he felt down. He says he felt down. He felt angry. So he gave up his dream of writing a superheroes movie and lost one of his closest friends, walking away from F4 to keep his sanity. Slater says that he wrote over 2,000 pages of script and about 18 different drafts for F4 in that 6-month period. When he gets a chance to work with Fox years later, he learns that only 2 of his Fantastic Four drafts ever made it to the studio's desks. Slater would also discover the studio's notes that were meant to come to him for Fantastic Four. And he realized that he never saw 90% of the notes on his scripts.
every other script note, all of the nitpicking, the demands, the rewrites, the script orders were all from Josh Trank, a man that Slater trusted. He was his friend. I imagine he felt incredibly betrayed by this. Don't worry too much about Jeremy Slater, though. He does get a second chance, and he goes on to write Moon Knight for Disney+, which is fantastic. He also wrote the ill-fated Coyote vs. Acme for Warner Brothers, which is a story for another day. Today is Josh Trank's story, and we are back in 2014. In an effort to put it into all of this chaos, writer Simon Kinberg is brought on by Fox to bring this rogue ship back home and get a script finished. He was more experienced in the business. He very quickly put an end to Trank's bullying and the stalling. And finally, there was a shooting script for F4, and the movie was ready to go into production. But there was an early synopsis that was allegedly from Kinberg's script that was leaked online, where we learned that Dr. Doom would be a computer programmer and a blogger named Viktor Dormashev, and there were a few other really weird plot points. At first, fans thought this has to be fake because it was so bad compared to some of the other leaks that were coming out. But then 20th Century Fox started sending out legal takedown requests for anybody that talked about this leak, about the Viktor Dormashev leak. There had been earlier leaks, obviously, for Fantastic Four, other rumors. We'd heard things that I went over for the Jeremy Slater script draft, but Fox did nothing about those. So why stop this rumor? The internet started speculating wildly that it was true. And, well, the final script, the one that was mostly put to film, is allegedly based on Jeremy Slater's original 40-page draft, expanded on with all of the stereotypical superhero elements cut out of it. You know, there's no training montages, there's no great camaraderie, you don't even really see them use their powers all that often. I finally sat down to watch F4 for this episode, and like, what the fuck? Sorry. First of all, the movie is 1 hour and 40 minutes, but somehow it feels like it's the runtime of the extended Return of the King. And it also has zero consistent plot. Here is my very quick overview of this plot. Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, really wants to build a matter transporter. He makes a functional one with his friend Ben Grimm out of junk that's just lying around. And they take it to a science fair that I cannot decide if it is a high school science fair, a college science fair. There seems to be even like elementary school kids here. Whatever. It is here where they meet Dr. Storm. For this, Josh Trank cast Micheal B. Jordan, and I totally didn't look up the actor that played his father as the Storms, and Sue Storm, played by Kate Mara, is the adopted one. Super cool. Anyway, Dr. Storm tells Reed Richards and his friend Ben Grimm, hey, that matter transporter that you built, that's not taking things to somewhere else on planet Earth. That's a whole other world. Do you want to come and help me build a larger scale version of it? So Reed heads off to the Baxter Institute, which seems to be an office, a school, housing, and massive laboratories all in one, all in the middle of a city. Anyway, Reed gets to help Sue, her brother Johnny, who is a street racer, but also a scientist, and Victor Von Doom recreate a larger scale matter transporter. Ben Grimm doesn't get to come along on this for, I don't know. He helped Reed. He seemed like he could have helped, but whatever. There is this weird, quick, half-ass attempt at a love triangle between Reed, Sue, and Victor. Thank goodness they dropped that, and now it is time for the boys and Ben Grimm, because he got a late-night phone call, and now he's here, decide to take a joyride in the matter transporter and get stuck. Victor Von Doom dies horribly, and everybody else, including Sue, who is back at the lab, but like the explosion of them returning, I guess, they all get powers. There's like this attempt at body horror as everybody gets their abilities, which seems like a great idea, but the CGI is so bad, it's comical. Reed then F's off to Nowheresville. He escapes. Oh, there we go. I totally forgot. They're captured by the government after getting their powers. Reed escapes and goes off to Nowheresville and gets back to turning junk into crazy science projects. Like, what kind of junk does this world have? Anyway. Everyone else is still captured by the military. Ben Grimm, now totally the Thing, all orange-bodied out, is working as a military asset. He's basically a weapon for the government. And Johnny Storm, now the Human Torch, is well on his way to also be getting that. Sue just seems to be hanging out in an empty hangar full of shipping containers for no reason, until suddenly somebody reminds her that Sue has manic pixie hacking skills. So she tosses on her headphones and tracks down Reed like it's nothing. Reed, for some unknown reason, just agrees to come back and help the military build the matter transporter. But the military does not let him shower upon getting back. No. He does not shower until the final fight, when his fan, Victor Von Doom, shows back up. I am not even going to go into the final act because it is so bad, and we'll learn why later on. Just know it's absolute nonsense. Here are my top 3 takeaways from the F4, my watch through the F4. I still don't know how old everybody is supposed to be. Are they college students? Are they full-grown adults? Are they high school students? The CGI is so bad. Like, terrible even for 2015. Bad. And the acting, number 3, the acting is really wooden, which is so ridiculous because F4 has a pretty stacked cast by 2015 standards, even by today's standards. Fox and Josh Trank pull together a stacked cast of hot young actors to embody the team. We have Miles Teller playing the team lead, Reed Richards, Mr. Fant4stic, Kate Mara coming in as Sue Storm, the Invisible Woman, Micheal B. Jordan playing Sue's brother, Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, with Jamie Bell as Ben Grimm's The Thing, and Toby Kebbell playing Dr. Doom, the villain, rounding us all out. The announcement of the cast, well, insanely racist fanboys had absolutely childlike meltdowns over Micheal B. Jordan, a black actor, being cast as Johnny Storm, who up until that point in the comics was white. He may still be white. This kind of reaction is still, unfortunately, all too familiar today, but back in 2015, it was aggressive and kind of frightening and all-consuming. The white fanboy mental breakdown was out of control, beyond what it is when something like that is announced today. Almost everybody involved in the production of F4, from Josh Trank to all of the actors, to the Fox producers, to the Fox studio buildings themselves, repeatedly received threats of death and violence because, again, the internet is the worst, and neckbeards are rampant on it. Micheal B. Jordan wrote a brief op-ed in Entertainment Weekly ahead of the movie's release in 2015, which I do recommend reading and letting him speak for himself on it. It's a quick read. At the end, he has a hopeful message for the comic book movie industry. He says, quote, "Maybe we can reach the people who are stuck in the mindset that it has to be true to the comic book. Or maybe we just have to reach past them," end quote. When the actors signed their contracts, they naturally asked, hey, what kind of comic arcs should we be reading to get to know, our respective characters? We're stepping into big shoes. How do we get a start? Well, Josh Trank informed them not to bother with reading comics because his F4 was going to be something totally new and separate from any of the existing F4, Fantastic Four lore. Woo! Haha! Here's where things start to get a little muddy. I'm unable to put together an exact timeline of events. Most of everything that I'm talking about is going to come from tweets at the time, fan forums, media sites, interviews after the fact, and some of my own kind of film industry info that I've learned researching this. So there's going to be a whole lot of allegedlys, and take everything with a grain of salt, but also understand that I wouldn't be talking about it here if I didn't think that it was a relevant part of the F4 story. But if somebody knows better, has any proof, can tell me a little bit more, absolutely, please let me know. Reach out to me. You can contact me on social media. You can check out my site everywhere. It's Paranormal Pixie. ParanormalPixie.com is also where you can check out some photos for this, my resources, and the rough transcript. Going into filming, tensions were obviously already really high. The script leaks, writer changes made the fans nervous, and the threats from racist nerds made the cast and crew nervous. It must have felt like seeing a giant storm in the distance and praying that it was not headed towards you. Trank gave a Polygon interview years later describing his headspace going into principal photography on F4. He says, quote, "I was so fucking paranoid during that shoot. If someone came to my house, I would have ended their fucking life." End quote. He also added in that interview that he slept with a gun next to him in his bed for the entire 72 days of filming on F4, which is totally the headspace that you want your director in a high-stakes, high-stress production to be thinking and doing. We have already seen Trank regularly clashed with his writers and his producers, and unfortunately, this behavior is going to extend to his cast and crew. Not a single actor seems to have much positive to say about their experience on the F4 set. Mostly, they've chosen to stay quiet and vague when asked directly about their experience with Trank, which is probably wise. Micheal B. Jordan did an interview with IGN touching on this project at one point. He called it a learning experience, saying, quote, "Everyone involved didn't set out to make a film that didn't work. You can give 100% every day and the movie still not work out." End quote. It's true. I am impressed by how well Miles Teller, who played Reed Richards, skirts around F4 questions because he is asked about it frequently. Allegedly, the two, Josh Trank and Miles Teller, butted heads pretty frequently on the set. Teller is only a few years younger than Trank and already had multiple large-budget films under his belt, which included the first Divergent film from 2014 and the Oscar darling Whiplash from that same year, 2014. So he's seasoned. He's been on sets before. I think he kind of saw through Josh Trank's bullshit and wasn't afraid to call him out on it often, especially when it came to protecting his castmates. Their allegedly tense relationship will, again, allegedly reach this boiling point on set. Kate Mara, who played Sue Storm, has been the most open about her experience on F4, saying flat out in a 2020 interview with Emmy magazine, quote, "I had a horrible experience on Fantastic Four." End quote. You see, Mara was not Josh Trank's choice for Sue Storm. She was what you call a studio pick. Trank wanted both Sue and Johnny Storm to be black, which would have been awesome. But this is back in 2013, 2014, so Fox is like, you get one. You can have Micheal B. Jordan as Johnny, but Sue Storm is going to be white, and she's going to be Kate Mara. Like I said, these kind of studio actor picks happen, all the time in movies. Like, literally since the studio system started. As a director, you don't always get to cast every single actor. I feel like for the most part, this does work out okay. I mean, sometimes it doesn't, and things go spectacularly pear-shaped. But, Kate Mara is a great choice for Sue Storm. She already had a long catalog of credits to her name. She was solid talent, and she was well-known since she had so many credits. Nerds knew her. Nerds liked her. So Kate Mara is Sue Storm. Like, no big deal, right? Well, Josh Trank makes his distaste for Mara's casting known. He allegedly takes out his frustrations with the studio's choice on her directly. Trank frequently berated Mara on set. He would criticize her performance, her work ethic, in front of everybody. Trank allegedly would make her reshoot things multiple times. Like, she would shoot something, he would give her a bunch of really nitpicky critiques and yell at her, okay, let's go again. Expect her to pick it back up and do it all over again. Basically, Josh Trank does to Kate Mara what Shelley Duvall claims happened to her on The Shining set. Trank's negative and frankly abusive aggressive behavior towards Mara reaches such an egregious point on set, it allegedly led to a fist fight on set. The story goes, one day during another round of nitpicky retakes, Trank calls Kate a slur. No one has confirmed which slur was used. I remember at the time in Hollywood on set, the rumor was that he had called her a bitch. But I couldn't confirm it, and this is all allegedly. Nobody has talked about this on the record. But anyway, Miles Teller allegedly jumps up in rage after hearing his coworker called a slur on set and just decks him, punches him straight down. Apparently a few more blows were exchanged before the pair was finally pulled apart. Everybody went to their separate corners. When pressed about the fight in a 2016 Newsweek interview, Miles Teller responded saying, quote, "If something happens on set, I think you should be professional about it. The people you made it with know what happened, and that's fine for me," end quote. Trank describes the shuffle in an Entertainment Weekly interview as, quote, "two A-types having a miscommunication," end quote. At least he didn't call them alpha males, I suppose. Again, this is all technically hearsay. It's not confirmed. Nobody has said that a fight took place on the record. But the story definitely has made the rounds in LA and in the nerd community, and I have credible sources that I've heard from that have confirmed to me that it probably is true. And it is a huge part of this story, even if it's not true. Just the fact that this is part of the lore of this movie and that it seems possible is insane. Kate Mara, despite having the absolute worst set experience, does stop short of saying that she regrets making F4. She does say that she wished she stood up for herself more often on set, but she also says that she met her husband, Jamie Bell, who played the Thing, while they were working on F4, so it can't all be bad. Multiple complaints against Josh Trank were filed with the Directors Guild of America and other industry unions by the F4 crew members for harassment, hostile work environment, and concerningly neurotic behavior. There was a high turnover rate for on-set crew, which is pretty freaking rare on a project like this. A lot of below-the-line crew, that's people who work on a movie but don't get all the fancy awards or accolades for it. They kind of will buckle down and push through a difficult production. I say from experience, we say to ourselves, it's only a few weeks, and then I can get a nice paycheck, and I will never have to think about this movie ever again till I see a trailer for it, and then I can tell my funny stories. So the fact that this crew, the F4 crew, is jumping ship like it's the Titanic is probably means it's a really terrible set. Josh Trank had to know things were not going well on his set. In fact, things apparently got so bad on this set that he decided to hole up in a giant black tent covered with tarps on all sides, full of monitors to watch all the camera playbacks, and he insisted on directing remotely from that little tent via crew notes passed on little pieces of papers and refusing to speak to anybody. That's right, Fant4stic 4, the F4 movie, ended up being directed by passive-aggressive post-it notes at one point. Again, Trank has tried to shrug off this behavior multiple times in interviews, even telling The Hollywood Reporter, that, this setup is perfectly normal. And while, video villages can be really useful, space stepped away full of monitors for directors and actors to review their performance, somebody directing from it solely while it's isolated is not normal. He's basically like a grumpy child in a fort asking for dinner. Like, hey, here you go. I have this could you step a little to the left, Kate? Or, whatever. It's freaking weird, and there is no healthy and clear communication happening on this set, if that is the case. When asked about his on-set behavior in 2020, more recently, Trank claimed that he had heard nothing negative about his behavior on set during the production, insisting that all of the complaints must have been filed after filming, which is super unlikely based on my knowledge of the film industry, especially on major projects. Like, problems come up and you want them handled. It's only a short trend. You need these problems solved quickly. Especially because oftentimes people's safety and well-being can hang in the balance on these complaints. Also, the credits show multiple on-set guild reps, which is not common. A director should be able to run their set without having outside union supervision. I believe that Josh Trank was aware of these complaints and that he knew he was being watched closely. Everything else is him just trying to play it cool or ignorant, in my opinion. And also it should talk enough for itself that he has done one self-produced movie since F4, a 2020 biopic about Al Capone in his final year when he was loony in the head, and the movie was panned. Absolutely panned. I know. Did you even hear about it? I didn't hear about it. Finally, after all the drama, the set tensions, the stress, Josh Trank and the crew finally make it through principal photography. They're probably gonna have to go back for reshoots, but they're done with the vast majority of the movie now. I'm not sure how the first round of edits went, but we do know Trank delivered his version of F4 to Fox by the end of 2014, and Fox freaking hates it. It said that this first cut was way too similar to Chronicle, especially at the ending, to the point where it felt like it was set in the same world, and somebody in a test audience described it as basically a sequel with Fantastic Four branding on it. But Trank did not want to make any changes to his F4, and thus the standoff between Fox and Trank got so bad that Fox finally brought in a whole new editor, Stephen Ritkin. He is James Cameron's Avatar guy. This is a big editor. He's brought in to fix this mess. He and the lead producer and writer Simon Kinberg basically allegedly rewrote the entire F4 ending and set up the reshoots to fit their needs to try to, make a superhero movie out of Chronicle 2. It is then that Josh Trank filed his own complaint with the Directors Guild against Fox during the reshoots. He claims that he was no longer being treated as the director and that Simon Kinberg basically ran the set. Trank also complained about not being allowed in the editing bay anymore. And in an interview, he further bemoans that Rivkin created the theatrical version of F4 entirely from scratch, using different takes for each scene than what Trank had originally chosen, and essentially Rivkin making his own version completely separate from Trank's. Look, I'm sure it really does suck to have a project that you worked so hard on pulled away from you at the finish line. But it happens. Studios get cold feet, or they have such strong ideas for the movie that when the director's vision doesn't match, they take it over. At this point in time, again, we're in 2014, Fox wanted the next Avengers. They needed the quippy dialogue and the, nerd, kid, parent, merch appeal. F4 especially the original Trank cut did not have that. Another example of this happening to a director would be Warner Brothers replacing Zack Snyder with Joss Whedon in 2017's Justice League. However, unfortunately for Josh Trank, and maybe fortunately for us, Josh Trank doesn't have a big fan base and cast members campaigning on his behalf and for the artistic justice. There's not a Trank cut. We do know the hypothetical Trank cut was supposed to be 2 hours and 20 minutes. That is a full 40 minutes longer than the theatrical version of F4, the one that hit the theaters. If you are daring to watch F4, if my description of the plot earlier wasn't enough for you, and I do not recommend watching it, the reshoots are super obvious. You can tell which scenes they went back and redid months later, because Kate Mara has a wig so bad it makes Jessica Alba's look passable. Miles Teller has facial hair as Mr. Fant4stic. Also, that's when he suddenly showers, is the reshoots, if I mentioned that earlier. He gets a bath for the reshoots. No more dirt once they hit the reshoots for Miles Teller. Hell, Toby Kebbell wasn't even available, so that's not even him underneath the Doctor Doom mask, which is also a terrible CGI Doctor Doom mask. All of these reshoots were allegedly at the expense of the special effects budget, which means that poor Jamie Bell's been grim. Like, the Thing is hardly in the final movie because the orange stone skin was just too expensive to add. And yet again, I find myself asking, what was F4 supposed to look like if it ran on all cylinders? Not even just the Trank cut. Like, what was Fox's version of this if they got to spend all of the money on it? A week before F4 is released in theaters, Josh Trank drops, and then deletes, the notorious tweet. This is what sticks in my head that and the Miles Teller fight stick in my head when I think of F4. Josh Trank's tweet read, quote, "A year ago, I had a fantastic version of this, and it would have received great reviews. You'll probably never see it. That's reality, though." End quote. We already talked about what the director's cut might have contained and what audiences that did see it thought of it. But let's focus more on the implications of Josh Trank's tweet for this movie. Suddenly, the rumors of the messy set, the obvious studio interference, and the downright disrespect for the Fantastic Four source material, it all began. Everybody started to piece together all of the gossip and get nervous, realizing their excitement of having the "I'm not big on superheroes" Chronicle guy directing the Fantastic Four was suddenly a cause for major concern. To top it off, following Trank's tweet, Fox announced a press embargo on early F4 reviews, forcing media outlets to wait until the day the movie was released to publish their reviews and their write-ups. I don't think I need to explain why that is a movie red flag, but it is. It is just a way for the studio to try to salvage some sort of opening weekend box office numbers for the movie before the world finds out it's awful. But there was never much of a chance for F4 to do well at the box office. Even if it was good, which it isn't, opinions were already set in people's minds before they even sat down in the theater to watch it, if they even watched F4 at all. F4 went on to be one of the worst box office flops of 2015, which was a year for dud movies. This was the year that the Jim and the Holograms live action came out. We also had Jupiter Ascending, Tomorrowland, and Hot Tub Time Machine 2. F4 was rumored to have cost Fox $100 million after promotional costs. That's $100 million in the hole. However, on paper, F4's budget was $120 million, and it pulled in $168 million globally. And we don't know how much was spent on advertising, but in my opinion, it seems like that particular rumor is unfounded. It seems like F4 accomplished the bare minimum box office for a movie like this. However, the reviews, woo! On Rotten Tomatoes, F4 has a insane 9% critic rating and an 18% audience one, which made it the worst reviewed out of all of those other terrible movies that I named. Come here. No, you're gonna get scooped. You're gonna get scooped and sit in my lap now. Yeah. Everybody say hi to Atten. Atten's joining us, for those of you that are watching. And you can hear him jingling if you're listening. Anyway. Great movies are nominated for Oscars. Terrible ones are nominated for Razzies. Yeah, did you know that there was a ceremony for terrible movies? You should check it out. It's kind of fun. Fant4stic won for Worst Picture, the Worst Remake, Ripoff, or Sequel, and Worst Director. And I guess I'll leave it there. There's no good little bow or button to wrap everything up. There's no magical Trank cut out there in the wild hiding to answer some of our questions. We haven't seen the other original script options that were chosen from. And according to Trank, most of what he wanted to film wasn't even shot. So I'm not positive if that was even a possibility, that the Trank cut was ever a reality in the way that he wanted it to be. But I am positive that nobody involved on F4 has any desire to go back and do more reshoots a decade later. I think it is very lucky that F4 didn't do much damage to the careers of its stars. Micheal B. Jordan went on to star in Black Panther and play one of my favorite Marvel villains. Miles Teller apparently crushed it in the most recent Top Gun. I refuse to watch Tom Cruise movies, so I'll never know. Kate Mara and Jamie Bell got hitched and have maintained steady employment in a variety of really stacked projects. And Toby Kebbell is in the Planet of the Apes franchise. Again, scared of monkeys. I also haven't seen it. Josh Trank has understandably remained in Hollywood jail. Between his on-set behavior, how much his actors despised him, and that deleted tweet pissing off a major studio, he's pretty much radioactive in the industry. He did manage to produce an indie movie about Al Capone's final years, starring, of all people, Tom Hardy. Apparently Hardy is a huge Al Capone fan and has always wanted to play him in a movie, and I guess he didn't feel like holding out for a better script. It was released in 2020 and was so critically panned, you've never even heard of it. I hadn't heard of it until I was reading this. Also, for those that don't know, Al Capone's last year, he was like addled with STDs and like absolutely crazy. So I don't even think it'd be an interesting thing to make a movie on, but whatever. Some fun facts that I didn't have time to fit anywhere else. Couldn't figure out where to put them. Mads Mikkelsen was apparently asked to audition for Doctor Doom. He said that the audition was super weird. He said he was asked to stand in the room, spread his arms as wide as he could, and then he was dismissed. Josh Trank was hired by Lucasfilms to do a Boba Fett movie while making F4, but then he quit when it became clear that he was probably going to be fired from it. Tommy Wiseau, the man that did The Room, apparently loves F4 so much and has repeatedly stated that he wants to direct a sequel. Please let him do it. That sounds fun. And it's also one of the few Marvel movies without a Stan Lee cameo prior to his death in 2018. When Stan Lee was directly asked about why he wasn't in it, he says that he was not asked to have a cameo, so he didn't ask for one. Thank you so much for coming to episode 3 of the PixieCast. I know it's something a little different. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into a kind of mess of a superhero movie. It's fun to share another passion of mine. I'm not just a ghost and spooky person. I'm a superhero nerd. I'm an everything nerd. So I like being able to talk about this, and I really hope that you had a good time with me. If you did, please, leave a comment on YouTube, give me a like, subscribe to my podcast wherever you are watching it. And I hope to see you in the next one. You can find me on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky as Paranormal Pixie. As always, you can check out my website for my sources. Photos, I'm sorry I didn't add photos to the YouTube video. I'm not at that point skill level wise, but you can still find them, and my sources, and a rough transcript of my script on my website, paranormalpixie.com. I do not know what I am going to be covering next time, but I do know that you will not have to wait this long. So please let me know what you think of this new format and everything of the video, and have a good day. Say goodbye, Hudson. He's hungry. It's dinner time.